Welcome to the Myofascial Health Podcast, hosted by me, Unu. Follow along as I explore the depths of John Barnes' myofascial release approach on my road to mastery. Along the way, I'll be sharing the lessons I learn as I open my myofascial release practice in Austin, Texas, so that you don't have to make the same mistakes I do. Welcome back to the Myofascial Health Podcast. Now, I'm joined here by a very special guest. He's a husband, he's a father, he's also an amazing artist. It's my honor to introduce Lon Breedlove. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm definitely happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, how we met was you were actually a patient of mine. I think you had seen I had a grand opening special and you took the leap of faith to trust me with your health. And I got to introduce you to my line of work. I'm a physical therapist by trade, a passion with myofascial release, and you've been able to kind of go on this journey. And I just want to thank you for trusting me enough with your health, and I hope that you got everything that you wanted out of it.
Yes, for sure. And I'll just add some context to that. Is like, I'm not much, I haven't been to a doctor or a hospital, and I can't even remember the last time. I probably should be better about it, but I don't frequently go into those environments. So I was completely unfamiliar with PT. I mean, I had a basic understanding just from friends and family that have gone through things like that, but started developing this injury while climbing. And then I saw you were like a climbing focused PT, a physical therapist. And so, yeah, it was the right time at the right place. And then my 8 weeks experience with you was life-changing, like not even being dramatic here, like completely like illuminated my understanding and broadened my perspective. And yeah, big time fan now.
No, I love that. I'm glad that you took the leap of faith. I myself, even though I'm in healthcare, I have a little bit of anxiety or fear going to the doctor. Sometimes I just feel like they're trying to give me meds or,
Yes.
I don't know, prescribe whatever medicines or surgeries or injections. I'm like, that's just not for me, Now, can you elaborate? Because I'm grateful that you said it was life-changing. So life-changing about it, would you say?
I think like at the highest level, it's just this like providing a perspective into my own self and my own physical well-being and my own body stature, however you want to say it. And it gave me a lens to look at all that I had never looked at through that lens before. So yeah, in that way, it's completely life-changing. Identify a lot of things that I could work on to improve. Identifying systems and practices I can deploy in the future just to kind of like maintain my best physical shape and comfort in my own body.
I love that. Now, you touched on something really important because what I firmly believe is if you do things that help you change from the inside, that's authentic healing. If you do things that affect you from the outside or externally, that's kind of a scam. Like you might get short-term results, but it's not going to be anything long-lasting. And what I mean by that is sometimes when we have an injury, you go to the doctor and they're saying, oh, you need surgery or you need injections. And it's this external stimulus to try to provide a solution. And in my experience, that just hasn't helped in the ways that we are sold that it's going to help. Whereas when you've done the kind of inner work or the inner journey to uncover what maybe has caused you to become this way from the root, then you have the option to change. And when you feel that from the inside through these releases, that is what has long-lasting change.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And kind of like goes to this kind of feeling I have, maybe criticism of when you couple healthcare and capitalism, it almost seems like you're like, it's a cynical thing to say, but it's like these healthcare companies aren't interested in healing because then they lose a customer and they lose revenue at that point. So you're like treating the symptoms or treating the effects when I think really like you're saying is like, if you go to the root cause and go deep down to the foundation and fix that, it's just like, it'll blossom more, it'll last longer. It'll like actually heal.
100%. They said that healthcare used to be an art, then it was a science, and now it's a business.
Yes,
And
yes, yes.
unfortunately, that is something that I agree with you on, where I don't think it's healthcare. I think it's sick care. I think it's just to keep you coming back because unfortunately it turns into this capitalist machine where it's all about generating money and revenue to kind of appease the shareholders. And I could go on and on about how that's
Mhm,
why I don't take insurance, because that's what they dictate. And for me, it's like
mhm,
if I can just help the patient and not be confined by insurance, then I feel like one, I can provide a such higher level service, but two, the results are what matters to me. So it's not about what the insurance is saying I can or cannot do. It's just saying, hey, I'm treating Lon and he's a person, and how can I help
mhm,
him along in his journey to healing so that he can be the best husband, the best father,
mhm.
and the best skateboarder that I know.
Uh,
Now, when we talk about artists, I think that before we spoke, you kind of can branch off with that one word. And
mhm,
and I think that artists are truly what keeps the world captivating. And
mhm.
whatever your medium is going to be how you express yourself to the world. Can you elaborate on what being an artist means to you?
Yes, I would love to. And like the artist, like when, like kind of like the typical understanding you get when you hear that word, your mind might immediately go to like, oh yeah, oil painter or watercolor painter. But to me, artist is like far more broad, and there's artistic elements to nearly everything, anything you could do in life. Even like some of your PT work has artistry to it in a way, or a chef has artistry, or like an engineer could have artistry. So to me, really what that means is like it's almost like it's like a perspective you view life through. It's that lens, you know? So it's taking ideas, thoughts, philosophies, or just feelings you want to express and like manifesting that in a way that transcends where it originated from. So taking something from inside your head and building it in real space, you know, or sharing it with somebody you know to inspire or affect them emotionally, things like that.
100%. And something that I often hear is if you're an artist, you're a starving artist.
Mm.
I think you hear stories about how artists don't get famous until they die.
Yes, yes.
Now, when I've met you, you kind of found a way to not only create a living, but, to be a provider for your family and to find yourself in this space to not only be an artist, but not to just survive, but to thrive. How did you
Mhm.
set this up for yourself?
Okay, so yeah, right before the show, you asked me things I identify with, and artist was my one of my primary ones with husband and father, like you said. But now that I'm a little deeper into the conversation, I would also put rebel to that list. And I thought, I don't know, ever since like I was a young age, I always had a chip on my shoulder when it came to authority, or anytime someone or some organization or the society tells you you can't do something, like game on for me. It's like, listen, I'm gonna go prove you wrong on that because I'm inspired and sparked up to go show you how you're thinking about it in the wrong way, essentially. So going back to this notion of like starving artist is like that was my goal, was to, well, not necessarily my goal, but that rebel nature is like, well, let me break that mold. Let me defy what it means to be an artist. You don't have to struggle. You don't have to starve. There can be a way to marry that with your income and like build a lifestyle and like a thriving lifestyle off of creativity. So if I could just interject with a little bit of personal history, there was this like small era of time, kind of in my early adulthood, where I set off to be an artist. And at the time, I wanted to be a filmmaker. So I moved down to Austin, where there was like a burgeoning indie film scene. And it seemed like a good place. Cost of living was affordable. We could make a name for ourselves, a big fish in a small pond idea. And then as you pursue that path, you realize there's challenges and difficulties that you could have never predicted. So it's like, so in that course of time, maybe a few years into it, I kind of lost sight of it and let the fear come in, you know, and it's like, do I want to be this starving artist for the rest of my life, or should I like buckle up and go get a bigger job, go to school for some sort of degree that could get me a high salary? And like, as we've talked personally, is like started going to pharmacy school and almost became a pharmacist. But pretty soon into that, maybe like a year and a half into schooling, I quickly realized like, well, okay, this will put me on a very narrow track that might be a good salary and a good foundation, but I think my soul is going to get sucked out, and I'm not going to be fulfilled. There's no creativity, especially when it comes to pharmaceuticals. Like, creativity is the last thing you want as a pharmacist. So I was like, I had this moment. It was like the perfect moment in time where I just had like a moment of clarity, and I realized that no, I need to bail on this and go do something creative. So pretty abruptly, didn't take long, dropped out of school, found this like kind of like a boutique creative agency here in Austin, Texas, and did what I could to like get in the doors, took the lowest salary they could offer and just get my hands dirty. And from there was able to use all my skills from video to design, and then took off. And that was the beginning of my creative career. And as we mature and as we spend more time in experience like that and meet people, networking is a major thing. You get to this point where all of a sudden you have this creative career that's paying well and fulfilling you with adventures and projects and all that stuff that really lights me up as that artist archetype.
I love that. I think creativity is one of the highest forms of, I think that when you see someone being creative in their craft, there's just something about them making it look easy. And
Mm.
that is, I think, something that we all have,
Mhm.
unless you believe the people who say that creativity isn't worth anything. And
Mm.
you become kind of this, what I would consider kind of like a mindless zombie. You're kind of just
Yes.
like following along what society is telling you to do, and you lose yourself, and so at
Mhm.
this moment, I think you're going to school to get a high paying job because that's what I'm
Mhm.
told to do,
Yep.
pursuing pharmacy, and you have this moment of clarity that you said where you're like, I can't do this. Now, when you made that decision, I know that this was maybe a long time ago, but was there any pushback from, I don't know, from family or friends or peers or anything like that?
I mean, I think there wasn't, but I think that's because going back to me as a rebel, like I think like my childhood butted heads a lot with my parents. Now we're in a very loving space, but I think they learned not to push back on things just because I wouldn't accept that as a bullheaded teenager. So I kind of got lucky in that way. But I think there was some silent, not disappointment's the wrong word, pushback's the wrong word, but like when I made the choice to go to pharmacy school, I think there was like some friends and family like, oh, that's interesting. I thought this guy was going to go on the creative path. So I think there was actually switching back into that lane. There was actually more support than anything, which I'm very lucky and grateful to have that in my life.
That's awesome. I have a cousin who is artistically gifted. Like
Mm-hmm.
growing up, he could draw the best of the best. And we always thought he was going to go into something creative. And then I think something that, as an Asian person, our parents pressure us into becoming lawyers, doctors, or engineers. And so he had pursued, I forgot what degree, but it wasn't in the arts. And then it wasn't until finally he was like, I'm going to do something creative.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to, be able to utilize his gifts. And then he was much happier, more fulfilled. And I think
Yes.
that's what you need to do it for. It's how are you going to feel when you do the thing? And I think it's easy to get distracted or aim at the wrong things, especially because yes, it's not to say that you don't need money, but if
Mm-hmm.
that's the only thing you use as a barometer what life is, oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a very shallow
Yes.
and depressing well to drink from. I feel like some of the most wealthy people in the world don't have happiness. And it's because
Mm-hmm.
I think that they have lost the creativity. At least that's part of it. Maybe it's more complicated than that. But I know that when you see kids who just experience joy, there's not a rhyme or reason to be joyful. They're just enjoying the moment, they're just living the
Mm-hmm.
moment. Now, what would you say to other creatives who are maybe being pressured to pursue the path that might pay more? What would you say to them?
I would say, yeah, that's a tricky one because like you said, once you find creative fulfillment in life, then like money doesn't matter. I mean, it does because you have to put a roof over your head and stuff. But like chasing the biggest paycheck possible just so you could buy material possessions, that's a shallow pursuit, like you said as well. And it's like that only lasts for so long. And the cliche term, money can't buy happiness. I mean, I would take that term to heart rather than go learn it the hard way, you know. But I think for me, and this might not answer your questions directly, but I think it's very related. And it's like get into something that you truly love doing, just like you said too, because there's a trap that like if you have this creative spark or some talent or just this like a leaning of sorts, it's easy to get tricked by this by the big glamorous dream. Like if you're a singer and then you're like, oh, I'm gonna pursue singing so I can be a big pop star and make millions of dollars. Or I like to make little films with my buddies so I can let me get into filmmaking. I'll be a big time director and win an Oscar. But really, it's like once you start pursuing those material things, then you're kind of like losing sight of why it is so important to you. And why it's so important to you is because it makes you feel something special. When I make something creative, I feel special. You mentioned skateboarding, and yeah, I just got back into skateboarding after 20 years. And when I was young, there was almost this trap of like, oh, I need to get into skateboarding so I can start doing these tricks. And I start doing bigger and better tricks, maybe get a sponsor. But really now it's more clear than ever getting back. I'm just riding the board because I feel amazing when I do it. It feeds my soul and it's an incredible activity that's both creative and physical. And that's why I love it. And that's why I'm going to keep doing it for the rest of my life now. So if you can apply that to figure out how those things work for the things you do, then you can like find a good fit when it comes to an organization or a cause to work for. And it's all about like lining up those two circles. And that's what really provided me a fulfilling career.
I love that. And I think it just goes to show that you really need to take a pulse on how you feel, because
Yes.
I think we fall prey to what it looks like and we forget how it feels like. And I know that if I could give my younger self a piece of advice, I would say it's less about how you look and more about how you feel. Now, something you brought up was skateboarding, and I'm glad you brought it up because I think when we talk about this healing journey, oftentimes it's just rekindling what sparks joy when you're a kid. When there wasn't a rhyme or reason to have to do things. You just did it because you wanted
Mhm.
to do it. And, for you to come back to skateboarding after 20 years, I don't know that you can tell me, but like, do you feel like you belong here, or is it like, man, am I just like past this part of my life? Like, what sparked your curiosity to do it again, and how has that process been?
Okay, so going back in time, kind of like at the beginning of high school to a few years after, is kind of like my skateboarding, the biggest years of my skateboarding when I was young, and became obsessed. I was skateboarding any moment I could, and every minute after school, I'd ride with my friend to the skate park and we'd skate till they turned the lights off. All summer, we'd be at the park all day, all night. And anytime in between, there was this video game called Skate. And it was like after the Tony Hawk Pro Skater video game became a massive like household name, this game Skate was like more technical and more nuanced. So to like skaters like us, it felt really cool because you were like doing flip tricks the right way. And long story short, 20 years later, about 6 months ago here, that Skate video game just released a sequel, and it's been like 15 years in the making. And I don't play a lot of video games, but it registered on my radar. So I was like, I gotta try this. I remember the old days. It was so much fun. So even like the first hour of playing that, it brought back all these memories I've had from childhood and like all these memories, skate parks, meeting the big skaters in our area and like going on trips with them, like to different cities to skate. All this like love and inspiration came back to me. So I was like, you know what? I kind of want to go skateboard again. But now I'm over 40. I know injuries hurt. They're more impactful than ever. It's scary to think about jumping down stairs. And then I was like flowing through YouTube and I found this guy that was like older than me, 50, 55 years old, and saw him trying to do a kickflip down 4 stairs. And he struggled. He like missed it 20 times. He just falling on the ground, rolling. And like he was more out of shape than I am. So that kind of told me like, wait a minute, what if this guy's out there throwing himself around? Like, why can't I do that? So just like that, bought a skateboard, delivered it to me. And then it was like, and then this like self-conscious moment of, oh no, am I going to be like the old dude at the skate park and all these like cool teens are going to be judging me? So I was a little nervous at first, but like the minute it took a day or two to like get my chops back and like be able to ride around. But the minute that happened, it's like all of a sudden you don't care about anything. You don't care about anybody else's opinion. It's back to that feeling. All of a sudden, like my heart and my soul, my mind lit up, and I was like, oh man, I can't believe I didn't do this for so long. Like this could have been such a like a source of happiness and love in my life, but no regrets. I'm back on the board now and loving it. And to your point, like, do I belong? I actually literally like 3 nights ago went to the skate park and ended up there for like 3 hours because it was like this perfect chemistry. There was about 15 people up there, varying ages. The youngest guys were probably like 13 to the oldest guy was older than me, 50, 55. And it was just this like mix of all ages. And it was just a beautiful moment because everybody was being very social and supportive and like encouraging each other to like push ourselves and try harder tricks. And like to me, it was like one of the best nights of skateboarding I've had in my life. And it was just like such validation that like, yes, this is why I'm here. And I actually had like I was talking to the older guy just because we're a couple middle-aged dads and like connecting on getting back into skateboarding in our 40s and 50s. And it was like struck me as like this is one of the few places, environments in society where all ages can blend together and like not just like share a space, but it's like actually like communicate and support and mingle and socialize. So it was just like this moment of beauty, like, man, I don't know where to find this otherwise. This is pretty cool.
That's awesome. You know what I love hearing is you didn't let the fear of judgment stop you. You know, I think everyone has those thoughts and
Mm-hmm.
they're going to tell you not to do it. And then you're going to feel some type of way about that, but you didn't listen to that voice and you just did it anyways. And it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like skateboarding from what I've heard, not just from you, from other skaters that I know, the community behind it is
Mm-hmm.
part of what makes it so great. I think in any activity or hobby that you do, if there's a community behind it, it's just much more easy to get into it because if it's supportive, then it's not about how it looks or all the things
Yes.
being scared of being judged on. And that's part of the reason why I like rock climbing. I feel like it's the same
Yes.
of environment where you could have kids to middle-aged men or even
Mm-hmm.
older, and everyone's just enjoying the sport of climbing. Now,
Yes.
on that note, you know, I know that you had spoken to me during our sessions that you had actually gotten your daughter into skateboarding. Can you tell us how that's been going?
Yeah, so still a work in progress. She's not as immediately hooked and inspired as I am, but she's open-minded, willing to try. And like just kind of her flavor, personality, like it's not something that appealed to her from like a stylistic aspect. But those first couple days, like where I actually got her out to the park, got her on the board and riding it, she's like, wow, this is fun. Because I don't know, you see any type of motion from running, riding a bike, surfing, skydiving, your your body feels it. And when your body feels it, your emotions respond, your heart responds, your mind responds. So I think anytime you do something novel like that, where you're moving your body or getting into some sort of flow, like I don't care what the medium is, I think we all will light up.
100%. Now, you brought up an interesting word, and it is flow. And I think what
Mhm.
you're referring to is the flow state.
Yeah.
How would you describe that to someone who doesn't know what that is?
Yeah, there was this acronym that I've forgotten, so I can't tell you that. But it had to do with there's this recipe when it comes to flow, and my understanding of it might be limited, but this is how I kind of approach it. It's kind of like this recipe of you get into this state of doing something often physical. It doesn't have to be because it could be literally painting, making art, making music, but it's almost like this part of your like conscious thinking brain almost turns off in a sense because you completely go into this like physical, almost metaphysical state where you're not thinking of anything, you're just actively doing it. You're very present in that moment, not thinking into the future or into the past, but just there to appreciate the sensation of doing it. And I think there's something like vastly therapeutic about that because it just clears your mind in a way that other things don't, if that makes sense. I know that's not very specific. I'm kind of thinking out loud on this topic. I know, like, from something I read, there's like a few pieces that you can put together to kind of like inspire a flow state or like try to foster it happening. And some elements are like there's like a timelessness. Sometimes having a risk involved is part of that. So like for me, skateboarding and like the risk of falling off the board plays into that because it's almost like this like circular cycle of energy where you're outputting energy yourself, but you're also like intaking it too. And it kind of just fuels you to go further.
100%. I think I just wanted you to elaborate because one, you're an artist, and I think that you process things in a way that actually I understand better.
That's
And
awesome.
and my way of describing the flow state, I'll explain it in terms of myofascial release because this is a
Hmm.
myofascial release podcast. John talks about two different channels, channel 5 and channel 3. Channel 5, you can think of like your left brain. It's logical,
Hmm.
linear, often impulsive. This is where fear is thought to be.
Hmm.
Channel 3 is like your right brain. It's more intuitive, it's creative, it's artistic, it's patient. This is where love is thought to be.
Hmm.
And everyone operates with both channels. But as we grow into adults, that logical linear brain tends to take over.
Hmm.
And what we are challenged to do is lead with the heart or channel 3, that creative, intuitive side. And when you do that, you're not thinking. So when you talk about this flow
Hmm.
state, it's the act of not thinking. But it's often hard, I think, for me, like when I first learned meditation, they say it's don't think about anything. And it's like, how do you do that? That's hard. But if
Hmm.
you then give a separate thing to substitute it for, then you can focus on something else. And that's where I think you focus on the feeling, right? And when you are in this flow state, it feels very centered and grounded. And what I mean by that is, just like you said, when you turn off this thinking brain and you are just there and fully present, now you're aware of everything around you and everything can kind of come into you and you're kind of giving out to everything else. And there are moments of synchronicity and there's
Hmm.
these moments of meaningful coincidences, and I think
Hmm.
something that you had mentioned was you had a moment of clarity when you chose to pursue the creative thing, which you already knew, but there is something about that moment, and I think that we get all these messages all the time, but we stop ourselves from seeing them because we're so hell-bent on thinking that it has to be done one particular way. And I think you're right. I think an element of risk can help with that. I think in
Hmm.
rock climbing, you find that because there's this
Yes.
huge risk of falling. But if you can just remember that feeling, you can actually apply it to any facet of your life. It's just that oftentimes, at least for me, I'm guilty of overthinking things. Like,
Hmm.
did I think about all of the possible scenarios that could play out when I honestly am just wasting a lot of energy? Because if I'm just present, I'll just let the things form how they're naturally going to form, as opposed to me feeling like I have to control that.
Hmm. 100%. And that's going back to like that this 8-week experience with you. It's like that was a big tenet over the course, a big theme over the course of those 8 weeks is like we're finding these positions or these feelings or these senses of release. Because when you find that, that can later on be your North Star. You know what that feeling feels like. So you can kind of like come up with ways to find your way back to that spot. And I think that's really essential.
Absolutely. I think this is what I am gifted to do. And so, we talked about what it
Hmm.
means to be an artist, and anyone who's creative can use any medium, whatever that might be. And I actually identify as being an artist in my physical therapy practice.
100%.
And my medium is you, like you're the
Yeah, yeah.
canvas that I get to work with. And can
Mhm.
I paint the lines that help you see a different light? And you've done a wonderful job of trusting and letting go. And so I commend you on that. And just like what you said, in myofascial release, it's different than other modalities because if you start to get into what's called positions of past trauma and you feel that
Mm.
position, it actually allows you to feel that in the past to release and process it fully so that it no longer plays in the background of your mind. I think your
Mhm.
conscious mind is less than 1% of your perception. Your subconscious mind is more than 99%. But we give so much value to what we can consciously perceive or what we can rationalize instead of being able to let go of all that and let the world kind of teach you, and you pick up on all of the vibes of the energies that are
Mhm.
always there. You just kind of block yourself from doing that. Can
Mhm.
you explain to me a little bit more about what your experience was when you were getting myofascial release?
Yes, for sure. And that's a good thing you bring up because that was like I said earlier, I'm very unfamiliar with PT and just kind of the whole pharmaceutical medical world. Not that PT is part of that necessarily, but those things. So as we went in, like my like limited naive understanding was like you'll teach me some exercises, you'll do some stretching, and obviously myofascial massage was part of that just because I saw your information, but I didn't know what that meant until my experience. But yeah, one of the biggest surprises to me was how rooted in those emotions it was. And that's kind of when I had this. I think there was a day it was like, oh, I get why they call it therapy now, why they call it physical therapy. Cause like, yeah, we're addressed, I mean, for a multitude of reasons, I'm sure. But I was very surprised that some of this work, like you said, would trigger these deep, deep memories, memories of trauma, and trauma comes in all shapes and sizes, but these memories that have been uncovered, like, oh man, I haven't thought about that thing in 25 years, 30 years. And now it's like coming up. And like you said, now, like physically, what you're doing is like providing these points of release, which is a big, big therapy to your body. But then there's a parallel to the emotional side too. So as the massage happens, like you're also massaging the emotion and then letting that release. And then as a result, like the next, even the instant we're done, but for the next phase of time, you feel lighter, both physically and kind of like mentally, emotionally too. And that's just like, that's a incredible feeling to have. And just like a point of inspiration and motivation after that.
100%. And thank you for sharing that. Now, something you talked about is the emotions. And in healthcare, we hate emotions because what we like is objectivity, and
Yes.
emotions don't allow you to be objective. And that's
Mhm.
why I think most healthcare is just sick care. I don't think it really helps.
Yes.
And so when you feel that emotion, that is normal, but I think we get taught that we're not supposed to feel those emotions. How are you so easily able to kind of allow yourself to do that?
Well, I think I'm easily able at this point just because I put a lot of work into that pursuit over the last decade. Especially when I've been fortunate enough to like have people in my network that are like tuned in to introduce me to meditation, healing past traumas as much as you can on your own, and breath work, things like that. All these different modalities that like help that are akin to physical therapy because they're like they target and they affect those emotional places inside us. So, over the last 10 years and, like, also to say, like, you kinda go down or for me, I go down a path a little bit with this stuff, and then I get sidetracked and distracted by lifestyle and work and all these things going on, and then kind of stumble upon a reminder and be like, "Oh, yeah, let's do this, do this. Oh, yeah, this feels great. I remember that. Let's do it more this time, do it more frequently." So, I think for me at this point, it was just I have been, like, thinking internally that way for a while, so and, like, but still, like, I come from my parents were not very big emotional communicators and, like, as a result, kinda, like, modeled this behavior to like keep those emotions inside. not that you couldn't talk about it, but that was just kind of like the natural thing. And there's comes with that is like almost shame or guilt of sharing emotions. So you always want to kind of keep that protected. But then as I matured into adulthood, I realized the benefit of like how beneficial releasing that stuff, or even just thinking about it or addressing it, even if it's on your own, you know? So yeah, I think that's amazing and it's super important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I like your perspective because you're a man, and
Hmm.
oftentimes we get told to not feel those emotions. When you feel those coming up, you push that down in that little pit of your stomach that you just never let anything out. And what ends up happening is if you repress your emotions, it will manifest in other ways that you're not going to like. It might turn out as like an achy back or soles or something like that. It will present itself because that energy, that emotion is being trapped. And I believe that the meaning of emotion was to move you. And so
Hmm.
everybody has emotions, and it's what kind of helps us move. And so if you turn that off or you repress it, that's going to be something that will bite you at some point. And so you've done the inner work to kind of help yourself process things, being able to talk about these things. And
Yes,
then what
yes.
you notice is this weight or this sludge or this tiredness is actually just me holding on or repressing these things. And you had brought up trauma, and I have gone a little bit further in my journey now where I can kind of express this a little bit more. But I used to think
Hmm.
trauma was like the worst things imaginable that would happen that
Hmm.
would make your stomach curdle.
Yes.
And what I've come to realize is that is one type of trauma, and
Mhm.
we would call that big T trauma. There's also a little T trauma, and that is like when you are feeling neglected, or if you had to disassociate, or if you had to just kind of repress your emotions. But those are all considered traumas too. But because I never had some huge thing, horrible thing happen to me, there was a point in life where I was like, I don't think I've been through any traumas. But
Mhm.
then as I kind of did the inner work to uncover, like, why am I behaving in this way? And it definitely reveals itself in, I would say, adult relationships,
Yes.
that then you are faced with this mirror that you then have to look at yourself. I'll say that the relationships or marriages that work are not the ones that point the finger at their spouses and say,
Mhm.
you're the problem because I'm feeling this way. It's actually
Mhm.
you taking accountability and saying, I'm feeling this way. What's causing me to do that? If it's not my partner, what is it? Whether it's my past,
Mhm.
how I was raised, things like that. Can you share anything on that note?
Yes, I'm in full support of that. That's really incredible. I think and to say, I just wanted to wrap up a point earlier is like, even though like I've done the work to be able to share and like think of myself in the way, it's still a challenge to say it out loud, even to my partner, because it's a point of vulnerability and it's scary. But the more I do it, the better I feel. So that keeps propelling me to go forward and continue that. I think for this, it's like, yeah. And like you're saying, like this energy gets trapped inside you. And even I was the same exact way. Like always thought trauma had to be this big, severe, super impactful thing that happens. And then also realize that no, it comes in, there's a spectrum of trauma that can happen. And I think like maybe you never have a big major thing happen, luckily, but all these little things, there's a cumulative effect. So they add up over time and perhaps they become a big thing if they're not addressed. And I think obviously, like you said, like storing these things, you're burying them inside. And at the time it feels like you're dissolving them into nothing. But truthfully, they don't go away until they're expressed in some way. And you might not realize that for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden something happens or they come up in different ways, whether it's a physical injury or some physical symptom in your body, or it's like the way you interact with other humans. I think another big thing. So yeah, obviously getting into meditation and all these modalities helps a lot. But one of the biggest things ever was becoming a father and just having this other human and you think like previous to that, I always thought fatherhood would be, or parenthood would be about the elders teaching the younger people, but that is a cycle as well. And I learned so much from her, especially because like at a very young age, children mimic their environment or mimic situations they go through because it helps them process and understand the world around them. So when I saw her to start mimicking some behavior traits in myself that I didn't like, I was like, oh wow, that's a really glaring mirror that I'm gonna cut that behavior out overnight. We're gonna not let you be influenced by that sort of thing. So like she's growing, I'm raising her, she's growing, she's raising me, I'm growing. It's amazing.
I think that that is such a beautiful message. I think I was speaking to a Hopi Native American.
Mm,
He was saying that children are the most pure things, like the moment they're born, they are the closest to the creator or God or
yes,
universe,
yes.
you wanted to, however you want to describe that. And because they're so pure, that is something you should protect. And I think when you saw that she was emulating a negative behavior, like,
Hmm.
whoa, I need to cut that out overnight. And
Mm,
I love that you have the awareness to see that. And I think you're pretty wise, because I
mhm.
don't hear many parents say that. At least my parents are generated. It's like almost like, oh, you're just a kid. What do you know?
Exactly.
You're
Yes, yes.
kind of seeing it as a mirror, being like, this kid is literally just absorbing everything that we put out there. So what am I going to put out there to help shape her? And in doing so, she's actually shaping me. And I
Yes.
love that perspective. Now, I guess, what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned from your daughter?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me think. I think that, like you said, like them being born is the purest a human can ever be. Cause then I mean, you're very quickly influenced by the thoughts and beliefs of your family. And then later on, the thoughts and beliefs of your peers at school. And then later on, society. And like, not in this modern era, it's like social media and all these like things that could be very toxic influences on a person, even adults, you know? So that aspect of it was just a reminder. Like I was about 29 when she was born. So 29 years of like all that influence, all that external influence and like and distraction and getting your mindset narrowed into this tunnel. And then you have a kid and then you're reminded of all the purity that comes with childhood and like the joy or the expression of excitement and happiness or sadness. And you're just like, wow, this is such a cool reminder. I had forgotten what it was like to feel those. And like kind of like we're saying with these things that we do through PT and other things, you're like finding this feeling because that becomes the anchor. So it's like parallel to that. That's a reminder of something you felt a long time ago. So now it's like all of a sudden like, oh, now I can put that on my map and try to find that again in different ways. So I think that's a major teacher that happened from that. I'm trying to think of some other good ones that I could sum up. I think also, like you mentioned on the Hopis said that purity is something to be protected, and like also subconsciously felt that about her. And I'm like trying to guard her as much as possible, and not trying. I mean, obviously, you tell your kid things about the world as they mature because you don't want to overwhelm a 5-year-old with like the brutal atrocities of the world, and that's not a help. So I'm trying to like not necessarily making her live inside a bubble or anything like that, but being very conscious and mindful about what's introduced to her. And then she goes to public middle or public elementary school and she comes back with all these things I didn't want her to see for years just because the other school children are like maybe their parents are different and they found this stuff out or from their older siblings. And so that was like a kind of a lesson too, like okay, you can try to protect an individual as much as you want, but you can only go so far, you know? So then it becomes you quickly switch lanes and it's less about obscuring everything, but teaching her the perspective on how to think about these things or what what a bully behavior in school, what that means on a deeper level, that kid's relationship to his family or his parenthoods or his household situation might be a lot different. And that's a good introduction to the concept of traumas at a young age, you know, because then you can start being mindful and having awareness over these things as you age. So we'll see how that turns out in 25 years. But I'm feeling good about it compared to the experience I had at her age, you know?
Yeah, I think that if you can have that awareness and you're only just trying to do better than you were
Mm,
and if you can say, man, yeah, at least I'm doing better than how I was raised, I think that
mhm.
that's part of it. You know, you're still gonna make mistakes. Everyone's gonna make
Yeah, for sure.
mistakes, but at least you're conscious and you're just putting in the effort to be better. I
Mhm,
think that
mhm,
goes a long ways.
mm,
Now, I know kids are important, and one day I will be blessed to have my own with my wife. But outside of that, sometimes you need some space away. And I know that for us, having some sort of retreat is necessary because I think it's easy and normal for us to get caught up in work or the
mhm,
daily stresses of life. And then you kind of need a reset. And you kind of went on an anniversary trip more
mm.
recently. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, for sure. And it's something I laugh at myself about is like, I'm very aware that these types of trips are so inspirational and therapeutic, but I am so quick to forget them and allow myself to get distracted. So like I don't even take that maybe go on every once a quarter, go on some meaningful trip like this. And every time I set my foot into this landscape, I'm like, how did I forget how amazing this feels? I don't know if I'll ever fully learn that lesson, but it's awesome because every time I go out. So I personally believe there's like some sort of spiritual connection between humans and nature. And you can and for us that live in like cities and suburbs, so quickly forget that. Even if we do have like Austin is pretty cool because we have a lot of green spaces and a lot of places to go, but it's a little different than like leaving town and like leaving your zone and spending hours to get to this place and being very remote. And for me, it's like finding these places that are not close to big cities or not close to civilization. So we just took a trip to West Texas, which is a large, vast desert area. I'm mixed with a few different climates. It's kind of where a few different ecological zones overlap. But we went to Big Bend National Park specifically and the town of Terlingua, which is like a cool desert town. But just like that moment, like stepping by the time we got into the park and you're like go far enough on the trail where like we're kind of away from people and you just like look out and you're completely surrounded by the most epic nature. Just the scale of everything is huge. You can't see that in the city or the suburbs. I mean, you see a big city and big tall structures and objects, but there's something intrinsic about being in a completely natural landscape and seeing that because you're not for me like it's half seeing it half feeling it
Yeah.
and it's like this special energetic thing that comes into you and just like it's both inspiring and like propelling and cleansing. It's almost like a flow state of its own. Like maybe that's the wrong term for it, but it's like it has similar properties to a flow state where you like forget about everything else and you're very present in that moment. And like the beauty of giant slot canyon with a river flowing through it and like desert and greenery and all this, it's just like it's captivating. And not to mention that this part of the country is in a very dark sky zone, meaning that it's like so far from any light pollution, even small light pollution, that the night sky is full of incredible detail. Like you from your naked eye, you can see the Milky Way and you see 1,000 stars and all these little ones, all these big ones, and like it almost looks artificial because we spend so much of our life here in the suburbs or the cities where you can't see that. We see a few handful of stars, but you don't realize what you're missing until you're out in this location and you're like, wow. Especially my wife and I spend a lot of time like, why does it feel like a planetarium or feel like a snow globe? And I think particularly in the desert is like completely flat horizon. You can see from horizon to horizon very clearly. There's no obstructions in the middle. There's like mountains on the edge of your view, but just this zone. So there's like, if you're like maybe 80% of your field of view is sky. And it's just outrageous. It's amazing. Highly recommend it to anybody. Even if you are not the person that thinks like, well, I like nature, but that feeling feels a little foreign and I don't know if I'd get that. I would encourage you to go out and find it. It's amazing.
Yeah, the place that comes to mind for me is Sedona, and
Yeah.
it's high light pollution, so they have to make sure that the lights aren't out of control and you can see so
Yeah.
many stars.
Yes.
And I think it's important to do it once a quarter would be amazing. And I
Mhm.
think the thing that nature teaches you is stillness. I would say allow nature to teach you stillness because we tend to become busybodies. Feel the need to have to be doing something. And when you unplug, I think I think it just helps to remember what's real. I think we fabricate these lives, and don't get me wrong, it's important, it's a part of it. But I know that I get into these habits that I'm not even conscious of. It's like I just naturally do it. And I think I read somewhere that 95% of your thoughts are the same thing that it was yesterday. So you're just doing these
Mhm.
same things over and over. And I think it's important to have a retreat like this or you just unplug and then you start thinking like, man, why did I just keep doing that? Like you're just not as present. And when you unplug, and you get to see the magnificent landscape of nature. I think there's so many lessons that just come to you if you allow them to. So whether it's Terlingua or Sedona or whatever
Mhm.
place that you might find on your own, I just think that it's a good practice to just be still in nature. And you might have to pull like, man, I need to be doing something, or I have this to-do list. It's like, hey, that'll still be there. But
Absolutely.
it's normal for us to be like, yeah, but I got to get more knocked out so I can add
Yeah, yeah.
more things out.
Productivity
Kind of,
matters too.
yeah, you're just on this never ending spinning wheel. Now, you had mentioned Terlingua, and I think when you shared it to me in the clinic, I looked it up and I saw that it was a ghost town. Is that
Yeah.
okay? And what was your pulse on that? Was that something that deterred
Yes.
you, a non-factor? What was that about?
No, and I think it's kinda like a cutesy nickname because, like, when I kinda found this out on the way, like, looking up places to eat or whatever, things to see in the town, and there's, like, all these mentions of Trilingo Ghost Town, and I think, like, rather than some spooky, ethereal thing, I think what they're actually describing is this area, this region used to be home to a big mining operation. So back in like the early 1900s, don't quote me on that, but early 1900s, there was this big mining operation, and then once it was kind of tapped, everyone left, and so that was kind of the ghost town element to it. But now the ghost town is like all these super cool old properties. Like there's a place called the Starlight Theater that was like a imagine like a Wild West cowboy theater with like live entertainment. Now, like they've like retained the walls and some of the original painting, but now it's like a cool cafe, restaurant, music venue type of thing. So Ghost Town now is just like the historical district of that area, and there's like a lot of cool vintage shops and gift stores and restaurants and bars and things like that. And that what you'll find is like I don't this is not unique to Terlingua, but any sort of like desert town or mountain town that's kind of like small in population, there's like a thriving creative community there because a lot of artists, starving artists maybe, they move out to this location because not only because it's more affordable and easier to build a lifestyle, but also because like that inspiration you get from the land and the beauty around you, you know? It's like prime ground to be creative because you're almost always in a state that inspires you. And one quick thing, I just wanted to relate back like that impact of the scale of and the beauty of nature was like that was another thing that was really evident in raising a daughter is because or probably raising any child is because like anytime we take a trip to a place like that and like she gets out of the car, it's like immediately throw her hands up and she just runs into it. Like, you take her to any place in town, and it's like, "Okay, I'll get out, walk normally." But, like, there's something so inspirational about even, like, the beach we go to often, or we've been hiking in the Rockies in Colorado. It's like the minute it's just like she's so motivated just to run into it, you know? So that was like, yep, that's when it really clicked. Like, yep, nature and humans are linked in a very strong way. That
I love that. Man, I just want to thank you for being open and honest with us. Terlingua is going to be on the top of my list. I'm
yeah.
definitely going to go visit on your recommendation. But before we get out of here, is there any last thing that you would like to share with my audience?
Yes, like, I imagine, like, a portion of your audience has experienced interested in PT, and maybe a portion of them haven't pursued it at all, And I will just say here, if you're on the fence at all, come see Dr. Q. It's amazing. When he, and not to brag, he didn't tell me to say any of this or anything like that.
I'll
But it's
give
like
your $5.
But kind of like, I remember my intake appointment, or like kind of like the intro appointment, and you're like, I'm describing all the things I'm experiencing, and you're kind of like giving me a brief on what the program entails. There was there's something very cool you do, is like, you asked me what my goals are. What do I want to have happen from this thing? What am I looking forward to carry forward into the future? And then there was this question that you asked, was, what role do you want me to play in your journey? And like, half joking, but half serious, I said, I want you to be the magician. And like, it was a funny moment, but that turned out to, like, he surpassed my expectations, because you performed magic on me and like changed my life. Like I said earlier, and like opened me to a whole new perspective that's like not only that therapeutic element and releasing and growing from it, but it's just like something, it's a tool in my toolbox now that I can carry into the future and like share with others, and like get other people interested in aware of this sort of practice.
I really appreciate that. Your words are far too kind, but I'm glad that it was received well. I'm glad that you got the results and you're feeling much better in your body. And yes, please share this with whomever you want. I think that having a healthy body is one of the things we take for granted. And so if you can help them in a little way, I would just love that. That'd be just part of what I'm here to do. So thank you again. Tell the family I said hello, and I will check in with you in the future.
You got it. Thanks for inviting me here. It was an immense pleasure. And yeah, looking forward to our next session.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Myofascial Health. I help myofascial release therapists create beautiful websites for their MFR practices, even if they aren't tech savvy. If you're just starting your MFR practice, or you're an experienced MFR practice owner, learn more about how I can help at www.myofascial.health/website.